Alright, good evening ladies. In today's video I'm going to go through everything you need to know about Hyperliquid, why it's one of my main plays, why I'm adding to this position, and why I think is one of the best medium-term setups going into the next leg of this bull cycle. And I do think once Bitcoin breaks all-time highs, which I do think is going to happen, and pushes up towards 120, 130, 140, I think Hyperliquid will be one of the best performers in that scenario. So obviously that's not guaranteed, but if that does happen, I'm adding to my high position and I want to go through exactly all the reasons why. So we have a huge amount of points to get through, a lot of data. So this is going to be a deep dive. This is like my Solana at $20 video. But yeah, super bullish. Let's go through exactly why. So first, what the hell is Hyperliquid? I'll go quickly on this because I'm sure most of the people watching know, but if you don't, it started off as a perp dex. So this is essentially where you can trade perps, which are perpetual futures. You can basically trade a load of coins on Hyperliquid, and most people do this on a centralized exchange like Binance or like Bybit. That's where most of the perp activity happens, and there has been attempts at doing this on chain before, but they never got anywhere near as big as the centralized exchanges, and there's a number of reasons why. Mainly liquidity and like speed of transactions. It was very hard to do on chain, but Hyperliquid have built extraordinarily good tech that it's actually possible, and it's actually a really good UX on chain doing this. And we can see some charts here of the amount of volume that Hyperliquid is doing, first in comparisons to the other perp dexes. And you can see over the last year overtook DYDX, which was the biggest one, and then eventually just completely smoked all of them. Once they did their airdrop, or people started realizing that the airdrop was going to be valuable, the perp volume went absolutely insane. And this is the volume of the perp. This is actually just spot volume, but this is the volume in comparison to the Binance volume. And as you can see, it's actually catching up. And it's definitely of my opinion that DEX volume is going to rival SEX volume at some point and eventually overtake it. And Hyperliquid could be one of the main beneficiaries of that. And if you didn't know, like DEXs is like one of the main use cases of crypto. And it's actually where so much profits are made from liquidations, from fees. Like people love trading perps, and Binance and Bybit made so much money over the years, and that's why they were able to pay Crypto and Carl to the moon. They made them billionaires from all the referral fees because they were making so much money. So perp dexes or perp sexes, anywhere that you can, like where people are trading, they make so much money. And Hype is actually taking some of the money they're making and buying back the Hype token and actually burning the Hype token. I don't even know if they're burning it. But Hype is making so much money and they're buying back the Hype tokens with those profits. So that's why on a fundamental basis, Hype is like very sound. And that's why, in my opinion, it's one of the best risk-adjusted plays at the moment, because it has fundamental value, and no matter if the markets are going up or if the markets are going down, they're still going to be printing, they're still going to be making good money. Do I think Hype is going to go 10x, 20x? Maybe not, but for me, I'm kind of thinking, I can put a bit of size into this and maybe double or triple my money over the next few months, and that's what I'm kind of hoping for and aiming for. The reason I think that's nice is because if we don't pump up, if we have another dump, I do think the Hyperliquid is still going to be making money to be able to be buying back the token, so it will act as a little bit of a floor and provide a bit of relief. So there's a little bit less risk in investing in Hype, in my opinion, right now. And as you can see from the chart as well, the chart looks absolutely beautiful for Hype at the moment. So it went through this accumulation range and just broke out. And I do think, like, if it does go back into the accumulation range, I think $20 looks like an extremely solid floor. So it eventually broke. It was trading between $20 and $25, and the $25 just became the Leonardo DiCaprio resistance. So eventually broke that Leo DiCaprio resistance, and looks like it really wants to send a bit higher, in my opinion. But yeah, let's move on to some other points. And just so you get a sense of how much money Hyperliquid is actually making in revenue, this is the Hyperliquid revenue in comparisons to Ethereum. And yeah, it's making more revenue than Ethereum, but has a market cap that's 1/40th the size of Ethereum. So, and like similarly with BNB, like if Hyperliquid had the market cap of BNB, it would be 10x higher. So that's just like BNB is kind of a similar product. Like I know BNB has some other things going on which helps the token price of BNB, but so does Hyperliquid as well. Anyway, what makes Hyperliquid so good? Well, Jeff, the founder, was actually a high frequency trader himself, like a really successful one. So he knew exactly what traders, high frequency traders, like professional traders want and need. So he built a really, really good UX. On top of that, he was already rich. So he self-funded the whole thing and built it himself. So he took no VC funding. So because of that, he was able to basically give the entire airdrop to the community. And that's why the community airdrop was the best airdrop of all time. I got a small enough airdrop, but plenty, like actually a decent airdrop, but in comparison to other people who were actually seriously farming it, people were getting 6-figure airdrops, 7-figure airdrops, some people even got 8-figure airdrops. It was like the best airdrop of all time. And once you make people rich, they're going to absolutely love you and love your product and never stop using it and shill it so much and say you are the greatest thing since Jesus Christ. So that's one of the things Hyperliquid also has got going for it, is that it has an absolutely incredible community because Jeff, the founder, made them all rich because he didn't take any VC funding and the VCs didn't get a load of tokens that they could dump on retail. The only people who got tokens were retail. And Jeff actually purposefully advertised or marketed, or he actually dissuaded VCs from using his platform. So big institution shops, he was like, oh no, we're just like, our DEX is too small for you, your size is too big for us, don't trade on Hyperliquid. But it encouraged the small guys to trade on Hyperliquid, you know, people who weren't trading $10 million on chain or weren't trying to trade with high amounts of money. So basically the only people who got the airdrop, like no VCs, no big shops got the airdrop. So only the small guy got the airdrop. So he really wanted to, yeah, that's just an amazing way to build community. So the tech itself is really good. It's really fast, it's really cheap. Like there's no gas fees, but it's not like super decentralized. Like people are like, okay, it's way faster and cheaper than Solana. But at the moment it has 4 validators, I'm pretty sure. And it's about to move to 16 or 32 validators. So it's not super decentralized at the moment. Eventually we'll get more and more decentralized, but for what it is right now, being just a perp DEX, but it's not always going to be just a perp DEX, we'll talk about that in a minute. But for what it is right now, it doesn't need to be extremely decentralized. But just keep in mind, the more validators you add, it's just simple physics, the less fast and less cheap it will be. So like it's not like the tech isn't a million times better than Solana, it's just that it's less decentralized. That's just simple physics. So they're good things that Hyperliquid constantly do. They're always the first to list the hottest new coins as a perp that people can trade. So, you know, Peanut or any of these AI coins that were taken off, Hyperliquid would be the first place that you could trade perps on it. And actually kind of a lot of the time, the reason you'd want to be able to trade them is so you could short them, because, you know, you can't short a meme coin if it's just on chain. So that attracts a lot of volume, and Hyperliquid is always the fastest to do it. And obviously a centralized exchange can't list perps on a lot of tokens, like really new and small tokens. There's a whole lot of, you know, red tape that they have to get through to be able to list a token, and you know it takes a long time to be able to be on a SEC. So that's one advantage Hyperliquid has. And any sort of problems that people are like, oh, I don't like this about Hyperliquid, they fix it really, really fast. So they're always thinking about the user first. So if you want to try Hyperliquid, you can use my referral link in the description. If you trade a bit, you might give me a few cents. So if you want to go for it, that would be great. Thanks. So Hyperliquid, you can kind of think of eventually as the on-chain Binance. And I kind of gave the comparison towards Binance earlier, and you can see that CZ, the founder of Binance, is already feeling a little bit threatened from this small little startup that launched like a year ago. He's already been like, hype might win short term, builders win long term. But Hyperliquid are 100% definitely builders. It's not going to be some short term fad. They're in it for the long term. They're buying back their own tokens. Like, what team does that? It's a completely different model. So this is a little chart put together by Kaizen.Hyperliquid, Kaizen Crypto on Twitter. And it's basically, he's calculated the price to earnings ratios for Hyperliquid and in comparison to Solana and Ethereum. So I'll link his thread in the description if you want to dive deeper on how he calculated this, or give him a follow. But yeah, basically Hyperliquid is currently trading at a price to earnings multiple of 10, which is like 1/3 the price to earnings multiple of the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is like a 30 PE right now. And if you know anything about investing in stocks, generally like the higher the price to earnings ratio, the more growth is expected. And the lower the PE, the lower the growth is expected, or the better value it is. But Hyperliquid is growing at an absolutely insane rate, and the price to earnings ratio is low. So that would imply that it's extremely undervalued on a price to earnings multiple basis. So Solana on a price to earnings is 16 or 77, but that was on the 2-day average. I think this was just after Trump launched. So obviously there was crazy earnings and crazy volume at that particular moment in time. So a better one is to look at the 30-day average. And Solana's PE multiple on 30 days was 74. Ethereum's is 230, so very expensive. And Coinbase is 60. S&P 500 is 30. And we can see that on a 30-day average, Hyperliquid is somewhere in the range from 11 to 20 on a price to earnings ratio, depending how you calculate it. You can look at how his assumptions on how he got the different numbers, but anywhere from 11 to 20 on a price to earnings ratio seems extremely cheap potentially. And it's growing. Currently their users are growing at like 2,000 users a day. So something like that. I think it's 2,000 users a day. And if it keeps growing at that rate, in 6 months, it'll have double the users and double the fees. Like if you double the users, it's likely that you'll double the fees if all the users are similar. But this is exponential, so could actually be growing at 2,100 tomorrow, and 3,000 users per day, and then 4,000 users per day. So it could actually grow even faster than 6 months. So the price to earnings ratio would be half in 6 months if it did grow at 2,000 users per day. So here's a graph of the users. You can see it's growing extremely fast. Obviously there was a massive spike after the airdrop, and yeah, it's still growing at like 1.5 thousand users. Maybe the cumulative new users will keep growing at this rate. Some other interesting charts we can see. The volumes and the cumulative volume still in an exponential growth. The slippage is trending towards zero, so the lower the slippage, the better the user experience, especially if you're trading with size. Now I do know, even though it's called Hyperliquid, liquidity can still be a problem if you're trading with hundreds of millions, that I'm sure some of you guys are. But I think still, like, there is room for liquidity to grow, because I know High Stakes Capital, like, he's one of the biggest perp traders in the world. He still has to trade on Bybit because his positions might be like 8 or 9 figure positions. So there's maybe a few massive traders that Hyperliquid isn't big enough for yet. But that's potentially still a bullish catalyst for these people with extreme size to come on. Okay, you might be like, all right, that's all very well and good, but at the end of the day, this is just a perp dex, and why is it getting a kind of a premium, like a layer 1 premium, if it's just a perp dex? Because we know like the layer 1s kind of have that monetary value, like Solana and Ethereum and Sui and all these layer 1s have the biggest valuations in crypto. Well, Hyperliquid is actually launching its own EVM. It's going to be its own layer 1, and it's going to be EVM compatible. So it's going to be called the Hyper EVM, which means you're going to be able to build stuff on top of it just in the same way you can build stuff on top of any layer 2 or on top of Ethereum. It's the same code, so that means EVM, Ethereum Virtual Machine. So it's all the same. Like, you can just copy and paste the code from a layer 2 project and put it onto the Hyper EVM. So it will be its own chain, and you can see there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of projects building on the Hyperliquid EVM that are ready to be launched once this goes live. Maybe in Q1, probably in Q2 is what I'm hearing when the Hyperliquid EVM goes live. And yeah, Hyperliquid will basically turn from just a perp dex into its own chain, its own layer 1, even though it is its own chain at the moment, but you know what I mean. It's going to be an EVM compatible chain. So we have yet to see if the Hyper EVM, like if anyone actually gives a shit when it does launch, if projects that are built on the Hyperliquid chain actually get some users. We have yet to see that. I do think it's likely that it will have some users, specifically because As I said, the community around Hyperliquid are they have a super strong community, so those people will definitely be using the products and the projects on Hyperliquid. And it is good tech, it is fast chain, it's good chain. So I'm sure the projects that are being built on it will probably be good as well. So I just want to compare the chart and the market caps of Hyperliquid to the other big chains that people know. So Hyperliquid has a market cap now of 10 billion and a fully diluted valuation of 25 billion. In comparison to something like Solana, Solana has a market cap just over 100 billion and a fully diluted market cap of 130 billion. So Hyperliquid is 1/10 the value of Solana. Obviously, Solana is taking most of the mind share and most of the activity at the moment. But for example, something like Sui. Sui has grown massively, but it's nowhere near the kind of usage that Solana has, but it still has a higher market cap than Hyperliquid. And yeah, there's a lot of VCs in Sui. So Hyperliquid kind of seems like the more retail friendly coin. And I think it easily should be worth more than Sui. Sui is a good coin as well. I do like Sui, but Hyperliquid definitely should smoke Sui over the next few months, in my opinion. And we already said the market cap of BNB is 10 times higher than Hyperliquid. Crazy in the market cap of Ethereum. Comparisons to Hyperliquid, let's not even go there. And the charts of Hyperliquid in comparisons to Bitcoin, it looks really strong. So what I'm kind of thinking I'm going to do is sell a bit of my Bitcoin into Hyperliquid. I think this looks like it's in a bullish, it looks really bullish to me. I think it looks like it's in an uptrend, and I think Hyperliquid should outperform Bitcoin. So for me, it makes sense to sell a little bit of Bitcoin for Hyperliquid and then sell that Hyperliquid into US dollars in a few months if the trade works out well, which it hopefully will. Hyperliquid in comparisons to Ethereum also looks good. Hyperliquid in comparisons to US dollars, pretty much the same chart across all of those three. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, maybe I'll sell my Solana into Hyperliquid. So if we look at the chart of Hyperliquid in comparison to Solana, it doesn't look like it's in an uptrend yet, so I'm not going to be selling my Solana into Hyperliquid. Obviously, I'm a huge Solana bull, so I'm not going to make that trade personally myself. I do think Solana still has really good upside and is potentially still a really good risk to reward at these levels. The other interesting thing about Hyperliquid is there's only a certain amount of spot coins that could be listed. There's an auction. I think there's only like one per month that they're able to add into, or they allow people to add onto the spot ecosystem of Hyperliquid. And I think the auction right now is almost like $1 million. If you want to launch a coin on Hyperliquid, you have to pay $1 million. So if you want the degen play, I don't know how many coins there are. I think it's maybe like 100. So you toggle off the strict coins, and then you can see all the coins. So people have just basically been buying all of them. So if you just put $100 into all of them or $10 into all of them, the hope is that a few of them are bought out by someone who doesn't want to pay the $1 million, will just buy the ticket that's already there. That team only paid, let's say, 20 grand or 50 grand to get that ticker and to be on the Hyperliquid spot ecosystem. So another team that wants to build a cool project basically circumvents the auction and just buys one of those tickers out, and basically that ticker and that coin is bought out by a good project that pumps a lot. So that's kind of the idea with that, if you want to be a bit more degen. Another degen little coin that I saw is, this is like the pump fund of Hyperliquid. It's called Liquid Launch and the ticker is Liquid. So really low market cap. I know some of you want to be a bit more degenerate and buying hype itself might not be enough potential returns. So that's a smaller cap that I'm looking at. The real rotation that I'm looking to do, and you could probably watch my original video on Hyperliquid, but like I said, the Hyperliquid chart looks really nice. So I'm buying Hyperliquid now. And then once it starts to pump, I want to buy the biggest meme coin on the Hyperliquid chain, which is PER. So the PER comes from Hyperliquid and it's a cat, and yeah, hilarious. But yeah, that's kind of like the bonk of Hyperliquid. So right now that PER chart doesn't look like it's in an uptrend yet. It kind of looks like where Hyperliquid was a couple of months ago, kind of still in the accumulation range. So what I'm kind of thinking in my head, buy Hyperliquid now, Hyperliquid pumps, and then you could sell a bit of the Hyperliquid into PER, and then PER should massively outperform Hyperliquid at that point. And PER is only like 100 million, a little bit over $100 million market cap. Yeah, why couldn't this get to $1 billion if all the top Solana memes are like 5 billion, or the top Ethereum memes are like 5 to 10 billion. Why couldn't the top meme on Hyperliquid get to a billion? So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. And that's kind of one of the rotations I'm looking at doing in a little while. And then this is a tweet from Ren GMI. You can see, I'm not going to read all of these out, but there's so many more tailwinds to come for Hyperliquid. So I just think on a risk adjusted return basis, Hyperliquid seems like a really good play. The chart looks really nice. The fundamentals are really strong. Now, fundamentals aren't always enough in crypto. We know fundamentals a lot of the time don't matter. Like, for example, Rollbit had amazing fundamentals. It was making so much money. It was burning the tokens, but it still hasn't really performed. So we can't rely on fundamentals, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you like to trade. But it's definitely a bonus to have really strong fundamentals, especially there's a bit lower risk, I think, when there's good, strong fundamentals on a coin. And you're not buying Hyperliquid at its peak when it was 30. It's come back down. All the airdrop sellers, or a lot of them who wanted to sell, who wanted to take profits on their airdrop, have done so. And it's gone through an accumulation phase. It kind of found a floor and now it's breaking out. So that's why I think on a risk adjusted return basis, it's pretty strong. Now, where do I think it could get to? Do I think it could get to half the valuation of BNB? Absolutely. That would be a 5x from here. That would be $150. So that's kind of, I'd definitely be taking profits before that, but that's kind of where I think we could get to. Could it get to half the market cap of Solana? Solana's like the same market cap, 100 billion, thereabouts. So it would also be like a 5x to get to 50 billion. Absolutely. Why the hell not, in my opinion? And we have to keep in mind, as the bull market goes on, Solana's valuation, BNB's valuation, Ethereum's valuation should double or even triple, like depending on which one, from those points. So the room for growth on Hyperliquid over the course of the bull run is also really strong. There's plenty of room to run. Oh yeah, I was talking about all the tickers. The last thing I'll say is by holding Hyperliquid and staking Hyperliquid, you're getting airdrop. So if you've been trading on Hyperliquid, just by holding Hyperliquid, you've been getting random airdrops all the time, and most of them aren't worth very much. But we also just got the Azuki airdrop. So if you're holding Hyperliquid, you got this anime airdrop. If you didn't know, if you are holding like Hyperliquid, I'll leave a link in the description, but you're actually eligible to claim the Azuki airdrop. It wasn't massive, but it wasn't nothing either. And I think people love to airdrop to strong communities. Like in the last bull market, people always airdrop to Bored Apes, to Pudgy Penguins, to Miladies. They wanted to airdrop to the strongest communities. And right now, the strongest communities are meme coins. So, WIF was getting a load of airdrops back like a year ago. And I think Hyperliquid could become one of those. It's already becoming one of those communities that get a load of airdrops just for holding the token. So that's another little bullish thing to keep in mind. Now, the airdrops might not retire you. To add to that, actually, Hyperliquid has another 33% of the supply that it wants to give to the community. Who are they going to give it to? They're probably going to give it to hype stakers, people using the EVM. So once the EVM goes live, probably worth trying out some of those products and trading your perps. If you're trading perps, there's absolutely no point trading it on a centralized exchange, in my opinion. Trade it on Hyperliquid or trade it on a DEX where you could get an airdrop. It makes a lot more sense. As you can see, like most of the people on Hyperliquid lose money. You can see the cumulative profits of Hyperliquid users is atrocious. Like most people lose money, but a lot of these people, despite losing so much money on the perps trading, made up for it massively from the airdrop. So even if you're unprofitable, definitely don't do that. Don't be unprofitable trading perps. Try and be profitable if you are going to trade perps. Only trade with a very, very small amount. I don't trade perps really, just like the odd time for a bit of fun. And I wouldn't consider myself a profitable perp trader. Sometimes profitable, sometimes unprofitable. I'm basically break even. So I just do it for a bit of fun, trying to learn, trying to get better. But even still, potentially in the next airdrop, now when Hyperliquid happens, or in the previous airdrop, even though I was unprofitable, I massively made up for it by getting the airdrop. So something to keep in mind. And that's also people going to think, oh, I'm going to, like me telling you, use Hyperliquid because you'll get an airdrop is going to bring more users, more revenue, more fees into Hyperliquid, which is bullish for the Hyperliquid token as well. So that's my strategy on Hyperliquid. I think it's going to perform well over the next few months, or when Bitcoin breaks all-time high. I want to add to this position. I want to make it one of my main plays for the next few months. It's not like one of these 100x possibilities, but I do think the risk to reward is really strong. So putting a fair bit of size into it, going to rotate that into per, and I have already a decent bag of per, a bigger bag of hype, and then at some point I'll be rotating the hype into more per. Now I'm not putting fresh fiat. I don't think this is the time in the markets, at the time in the crypto cycle, to take fresh money from your bank account and be investing in crypto, unless you have no money in crypto. So I'm not putting fresh money in. Like any money I've taken out, I'm trying to keep out of the markets in case we have already topped. There's like a 1% probability or 5% probability of that, but I'm still 95% invested, so I'm not going to be putting more cash in. So I'm just rotating my bags. All the coins that I don't think have a great risk to reward anymore in comparisons to hype, I'll just be converting them into hype. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it. If you want to buy hype, at the moment you have to get USDC, put it onto Arbitrum, so you can send USDC from Binance or from Coinbase over the Arbitrum network onto Hyperliquid, and that's how you can buy Hyperliquid. And that's actually bullish, that you can't buy Hyperliquid on any centralized exchanges yet. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to buy, which means there's more potential buyers to come in as well. So that's all for today's video. Really hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, and hope Hyperliquid goes to the moon. So thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye. Not financial advice.